You ready?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right.
Finally. We're back in our element, gentlemen.
Yes.
Back to trash.
We're back to talking about Bigfoot and UFOs and all things not related to
lizard
elections.
people.
Or like tonight, just any damn thing. I don't care. Topic tonight is just bring a story. So
Stories worth a toast.
yeah. I think I was going to call it, what did Cliff come up with? Cool story, bro.
Cool story, bro.
Toastable tales. And then whatever happened to him, and he left. So we'll talk shit about him.
Well, I will tell you that the impression I got when we were sharing messages back and forth about the topic of this was meaningful stories that were worth toasting. And so that's what
That's what I took out of it too.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a quick conversation. Mine, I immediately thought of something. In fact, something I learned just a few days ago about an ages-old story that I love. And so we're going to roll with that.
Okay.
I think one thing I want to do is make the first few minutes of this video, we're going to toast to the Howling Place Man Up to Cancer group.
Yes.
With
Got the
Suntory
Suntory.
Toki. Yeah. I don't remember who wanted to try Japanese. Was that you?
Yes, that was me.
Yeah. So Mike is a non-drinker. Mainly, you just don't like the taste of.
I don't like any part of it.
I mean, we've had wine together
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. We wanted to try this, so.
You need a weapon?
Oh, no.
Bam.
See, now I've definitely
You beat
feel
me to the
underdressed. I don't
drum.
have an...
You always have to have weapons on
Yeah.
you. This
Yeah.
is West Texas.
I have a bunch of pins in my pocket that could be makeshift weapons.
This is my Benchmade that Sensei's an insult. He's like a 200th Dan in Aikido gave me 154 Charlie Mike version.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
I like
Very
that.
nice. Very nice piece of gear.
By the way, I did stab a kid with a pencil in 7th grade one time.
Did you really?
Yeah, I knew he was going to beat me up, so I just stabbed him. That's probably another
That'll
story
work.
for a different podcast.
I had a kid tried to stab me with a pen when I was a cop, and I
pretty
punched
cool.
him out, but that was it.
That's a pretty nice knife. Now I have
I
this
have
other.
lived to it.
These knives I have on me today are both Smith and Wessons, and you know what? I left my other one at the brewery because it's sharper.
I thought you were going to say you left it in a dead hooker.
That means
somewhere.
Aaron will take it home,
good.
and I'll never
That's
see
good.
it again.
Come on.
Yeah,
That was
I just came up with
I
that.
tried to glaze over it. But
I was waiting for the reaction from Tim, so I passed over a little bit on that.
Say, man, so I did want to dedicate it to the guys in the Howling Place as usual, but I thought about them today because one of the things I appreciate about these gentlemen is about the only thing with the darker humor than a cop is a guy with cancer, right? And so coronavirus is all in the news. I actually heard a kid in the store today upset, worried about coronavirus, with his mom, and she's wearing like 10 scarves, and I thought, she's the one posting all over Facebook about it. Anyhow, so one of my buddies, Josh Gillett, I think I'm pronouncing it right, on he's a founding member of Man Up to Cancer, posted this on Facebook. I'll put it up. Man, I really hope I don't catch anything going around with a 2 to 3% mortality rate.
I hate to laugh at that.
Yeah.
But
You can laugh at it.
Okay.
It's funny as hell,
Yeah.
man.
You sent that, and I was like, I don't know how to respond to this, so
Yeah.
I'm just going to.
But it's so
Yeah.
true, man. It just shows you how life is all about perspective and experience and what you're going through, and that certain things that certain people are going through offer a unique perspective that maybe other people don't have the parameters to think about.
Yeah, I'm in a waiting room for stage 4 clinical trial, and it's like, be careful about coronavirus. I'm like, that virus better catch up if it wants to get to me. So
The virus is behind the curve. Yeah.
So part of it, the Howling Place, for everybody that's new, the guys that are there, we're going to post the first few minutes, the whiskey tasting, to the Facebook group. And when it got started, like the icebreaker was everybody sharing their favorite whiskey, or maybe it was just alcohol in general. But I want to give this stuff a try, a quick review, and see what these guys think of it. So, Mike, I'm interested to see how you're going to take this. If
Somebody give me some bullet points that I can throw out there to sound intelligent about this.
Well, you have extremely acute sense of taste, so I'm not gonna. I don't know what I can tell you.
Yeah.
From a guy who's eaten century eggs and made me eat a century egg in this room, it still smells like duck fart to this day.
Yeah.
I can tell you, if you don't like it, if it's too strong of a taste, you got to let the alcohol kind of waft away and then get what's left. Throw one of the RO ice cubes in it. and let
swish
it
it.
kind of knead its way down.
Yeah.
And
It smells really clean.
it does.
It's not a peat smoked whiskey or anything like that. It's not like a Scotch. It's a very fruity, clean aroma.
There we go.
It's very fruity. There's no doubt about that.
It smells like it's not going to have the bite of what we're used to. I've never had a Japanese whiskey, and I did notice it looks to be kind of oily.
Yeah, I was going to say that. And also, I saw somebody do this on a movie one time, so I've just been kind of doing
Well,
yeah.
somebody that knows a lot about brandies showed me this, an old man, where you turn it and you can see the oil sort of streak down. And it's different from the bead, which is, the like bubbly fizziness. By the way, hey, Mike, I'll tell you what, if you'll take a picture of that for me.
I can only imagine that this
I'll put it
is
up in the soft box.
Oh,
Again,
yeah.
It's really pretty.
It's very light. It's very light blonde, delicate sort of whiskey.
Hang on.
I'll tell you, as much as I love Scotch, I'll tell you straight up while you take that picture that I'm going to be partial. I'm partial to most things Japanese because they tend to do everything so well. Like 2 of my 3 motorcycles are Japanese. 1 of my 2 vehicles is Japanese. I am constantly watching videos about Japanese stuff, and so Japanese whiskey is a new territory for me.
Well,
so.
and there's also probably a 71-step, 200-year-old ceremony for putting the cap on the bottle when you're done. Right?
point.
It's like considered an art form
Exactly.
or whatever, and you wear a special belt for it, blong, and you...
And if you do it wrong, you have to no.
Yeah, you have to move out of the village
Yeah.
and shame yourself.
You're shunned.
Yeah. I don't know where this is actually from.
Well,
Just says product. Oh, there it is. Nope, just says product.
I actually did some research on that one, and now that you're trying to figure that out, it's all gone.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to my world.
okay.
Free. Cheers.
Cheers, boys. Yeah, it's super good.
More bite than I thought.
More smoke than I thought. I didn't get
woody,
any.
kind of a sandalwood thing going on.
Yeah, I didn't get any smoke at all on the nose, but you get it on the palate.
In a ramen bowl theme. Right. That is nice. It is a bitier taste than I expected.
Okay.
So do we figure out what that's actually, I mean, we're obviously using a Pyrex deal, a kneading
A neat pitcher.
neat pitcher.
Yeah. But technically that's a misnomer because if you drink it neat, you just drink it out of the bottle into a glass.
Okay.
So there's got to be some other more correct term for it. But yeah, it's just a way to pour and kind of get some oxygen and water into the whiskey to open it up a little bit.
But I get it. That would go with a Japanese steak. Really will. Mm-hmm. I totally get it. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
It's good.
I
got the kind of woody
do this.
taste to it that the other one didn't have. Instead of the peat moss, it's kind of a wood thing going.
Yeah, definitely not peaty, but there is a smoky flavor to it, and that could be from the wood. I don't know anything about this whiskey, but maybe an educated guess would be that they did age it in probably an American charred oak cask that had made whiskey already. It had made a bourbon, and so they used it and aged it there, but not for very long because it's a very light blonde color.
Yeah.
It's the color of that lager you're drinking. Yeah, it
really is.
So
Damn close, yeah.
So it's very, very delicate in color, and it's very fruity on the nose, but you don't get smoke until it's on the palate. So
my palate is chemically damaged, but once the water melted a little bit, that fruity note came out. It's really nice.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
It's very good stuff. This was an excellent choice.
Fantastic. Well, to all the gentlemen at the Howling Place, Man Up to Cancer, cheers to you guys. I hope everything goes well.
Here's to you.
I'm sorry about the faces I'm making.
That's okay, Mike. It's all right. And the rest of the podcast we're going to push on is going to be on the Van Cave on Facebook, the Van Cave on YouTube, or thevancave.com for audio feeds, Buzzsprout podcast, wherever you get your your audio material, and we're going to press on. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So where are you on this, Mike?
You know, I smell it and it's like, oh, that's a nice smell. I like how it is. And then I taste it and the alcohol there is there.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's just kind of like it I can get it and then it kind of hits me. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's like, oh, that's a little bit much. But
well, whiskeys tend to be like that. I mean, that's the whole object of any distillate is to have a high content of alcohol. The thing that you have to look for, what I always do, because I drink a lot of beer.
Yep.
You know, I brew beer, being a deputy brewmaster and all that stuff. I'm constantly drinking beer. So when I do have a distillate, I have this little adjustment moment. It takes a couple of moments. I realize, oh wow, this isn't 6% alcohol. This is 50% alcohol or 40%. You know,
there's something about breathing out the nose or something. Mm-hmm. Is that with whiskey or?
I think so. Another thing about whiskey is if you're consuming something greasy along with it, like a really good steak, it melds a little bit better than just coming in, having a couple of snacks, in the kitchen, just water, and then drinking whiskey. And also, like I said, you let that ice melt and it's going to mellow, and it's going to pull those flavors out for you without cutting through, without the hard liquor punch, if you're into that.
Yeah, that's kind of what's getting me, just that punch.
Oh, yeah, that'll come and go. And I'll let mine sit. I'm the same way. I'm real sensitive to heat and burn. I'm still getting over that. And just to let it kind of sit and mellow in the water, it'll go a long way. And it won't take long because the way the alcohol evaporates off of it, it'll get there. So our behind-the-scenes talk, I told you guys, just bring a story. And what I was thinking about on this when I said it, I've kind of been missing going to Murray's because my treatment days are on Wednesdays. Yeah. And so I was in Houston, flew in, flew out.
And for those of you who don't know, we have this little brain trust that meets every Wednesday night at Murray's Delicatessen in Midland.
I have a story about the Murray's this last week real quick.
Cool. It's been going on for decades, and it's kind of spawned the podcast. I mean, that's one of the things that really brought it on.
Yep.
Because what we'll do is you'll be reading a book or your favorite YouTube channel or something will happen at work, and you look up and nobody in the room with you can appreciate it. Like there's nobody you can walk down the hall at work and tell. Your wife doesn't care, but you're going to take it to Murray's and everybody's going to dig it. So I kind of miss that when I can't be there. So I just said, hey guys, just take a story, put it in your pocket, and we'll bring it on there. So you got a Murray story?
Well, not so much a Murray story, just more about why I wasn't at the last Murray's.
Oh, okay.
So I was at work all day. I just gotten back from Oklahoma City. And, this is a couple of days later, but I figured out there wasn't really any rest period in between having to travel and do all the work and then coming back here and just go back into work. So on Wednesday, I got home and I was like, oh, I need to go meet everybody at Murray's. I'm going to sit down for a minute, watch YouTube, and then I'll just, get up and go down there whenever it gets close to whenever everyone's meeting up there. And then the next thing I knew, it was 7:30 the next morning.
I was going to say the Morgan Freeman voice, but Mike didn't go to Murray's.
So it was about 6 o'clock to about 7:30 the next morning. I was just completely out of it. I told people I had a proper blackout, just passed out.
I can't do Morgan Freeman, but Mike didn't go to Murray's. He woke up to the sound of a spring rain 3 months later.
Well, I'll tell you, I envy you that, Mike. I wish I could sleep that soundly. I don't. I wake up 3 to 5 times a night. I can't. I tell this story. What my story that I'm going to tell tonight is about my granddad. Mm-hmm. And so the best night's sleep I remember my whole life, I was about 6 years old. And I will never forget this because I was so tired. I can't remember what we had been out doing. I think we went fishing and riding in my granddad's boat, and I was just waxed when I got back to my grandparents' house. And I laid down in the bed at my grandparents' house, and there were a bunch of adults over, a bunch of family was over in there. They always used to meet in my grandparents' kitchen, and they're laughing and drinking, and just, those are great memories. Mm-hmm. Just those sounds, hearing them. Oh, you kids need to go to bed now, but you could hear them in there having fun. Well, back in those days, on television, there used to be Channel 2, which was the information channel. You remember this, Matt?
I do.
It was basically a graphics channel, very, very primitive graphics that showed what direction the wind was blowing from, what the weather forecast was, and any news items were in a crawl on the bottom. And they played a local radio station in the background. And I remember laying down in that bed, and I was so tired, and I was trying not to fall asleep because it was playing Wildfire by Michael Martin Murphy.
Yes.
Is that it? And I loved that song about the girl whose horse ran away and got killed. And I didn't, but I remember I thought, okay, as soon as this song is over, then I'm going to fall asleep. I closed my eyes, and I opened my eyes, and it was morning. I was taken out of this universe, put into a different string in the multiverse, and then dropped back in. I literally closed my eyes, opened them back up, and it was morning.
Bam.
I wish I could sleep like that every night. I was so rested.
That reminds me of yet another cool story, bro. Back in the 80s, my family and I went I think it was in November, to Cloudcroft. Mm-hmm. Stayed at Spruce Cabins, where we go for the ride in whenever the hell it is, August or whatever.
August.
And my wife and I stayed there, and Cliff and I stayed there. And they're still beautiful little cabins, reasonably priced. Go up there for a weekend. It's nice and cool and up high. But their channel tube was a rotating, like a Lazy Susan, just a little rotating platform with gauges on it. Mm-hmm. And you could tell they were, they had depth. You could see the face, but the mechanics went back toward the center of the thing, and it just had a camera on that and rotated to the temperature. Then it rotated to the wind speed, and then it rotated to the wind direction, and then the barometer. It was so cool just to sit and stare, because I'm a kid. I'm ready to go out and go climb trees and shit, and all the adults are, making breakfast and taking showers and stuff.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything else on. I just sat and watched that forever, and I can't find one on YouTube, but that was some station out of New Mexico years ago. Good memory.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, who wants to go first with a story?
Okay, well, I just pulled this whole thing into the ditch by telling a story. So
you started
somebody
the story.
else start.
Mike, jump in, man.
Okay.
I'm going last.
Okay.
It's my podcast, and mine's really funny.
So I had some trouble coming up with a story, because I was like, what can I tell that's worthy to toast to? And selfishly, I looked at myself and was just like, I'll just do that. Because I had an incident today that I was like, you know what? I got through it, and I'm okay with everything. So what you guys probably don't know about me is that I have a lot of just anxiety, and just kind of dealt with some depression the last couple of years, really kind of throughout my life.
Yeah.
And it's just, there was a period where it gotten to a point where everything was just downhill, and it was no way that I was going to get out of that. And so today, I see my voice is cracking a little bit.
Yar.
Yeah.
Yar, matey.
Today,
it's all right to get emotional, because I'm
yeah.
going to get emotional on mine. So let it go.
Had real bad anxiety today. And I don't know what really brought it on. It was just a bunch of little things that was coming throughout the last couple of days, and it hit a point where it was right after lunch, pretty close to 1:00, and it was just like, I have to stop moving. I have to get out of this area. I need to do something in order to just get through this.
Yeah.
And, I stopped for a minute. I sat down. I was like, I need to take care of my mental health right now. And so I went to a corner of the shop that I was at. I sat down. I pulled out my phone, and it was just kind of looking at, there's an app, actually. I can't remember the name of it now that I'm trying to talk about it. But it gives you little things to do. And so it's like, okay, how many, cups are in this area? What can you do to distract yourself that it's just going to take your mind away from everything that you're internalizing and just get to where.
So the anxiety will break.
Yeah. And so I was sitting there, and, I just got through that. I started looking at different things, and as I was looking at it, it was just like, okay, there's 12 cups over here. There's some trash on the floor, and that really shouldn't be there, but, that's not a big deal. And as I started looking at everything, it's like, okay, there's really nothing that I should be feeling this way for. And so I just got through that whole situation, got through that whole little ordeal that's been going on, like I said, for the last 2.5 days, and it just finally kind of clicked and was like, okay, you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. And so that's,
man,
holy hell, man.
That right there is one of the breakthroughs with people who, and I struggled with you. I mean, I don't know how much you and I have talked about this, but I struggled with anxiety for years.
Same here.
And really bad. In fact, the first time I had a full-blown anxiety attack, I didn't know what was happening, and I quite literally thought that I was dying.
That's kind of how I felt that first time too. Yeah.
They do feel that way.
Yeah, and especially when you don't understand them. But one of the main things you have to tell yourself is kind of what you told yourself.
Yeah.
This is going to, once you get focused on the fact that this is temporary, like the attack itself. Okay, all right, I'm going to have this anxiety attack. Bring it, because it can't last forever. Physiologically, it's going to pass at a certain point. And you were able to make that mental connection and make that realization. And once I've read that once people, and it helped me too, once people start to make that connection, it's a form of control over the anxiety attack. And over time, if you can keep yourself in that mental framework, they will become less frequent. And when you do have them, they'll be less severe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a blink. I went through a period of that after a shooting, and I'd had anxiety problems. I didn't know it, but all my life, going back to a kid, before you have anxiety. And it's just not something you can explain, because normally if the parents say, hey, Matt, are you okay? You're like, my tummy hurts, or I have a headache. How the hell do you explain a feeling of disassociation when you're 8?
Right.
You can't do it. And it wasn't until years later, I was in a shooting, and it was a mess. And I started going through the post-critical incident stress with the most pronounced anxiety attacks I've ever felt in my life, and flashbacks, like no shit, the real thing. I was at a stoplight, typical day at work. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going, where I'm supposed to be. Am I going to do this at this time? I forgot who's cooking dinner tonight. All the stuff you have in your head when you're just working. And I got behind a vehicle, the same color as the vehicle involved in a shooting, and not the one I'm talking about, but a later one, and a guy that was dressed the same. Bam. And it's like instant adrenaline punch. My brain goes, the last time this happened, somebody tried to run over you.
It's like a switch.
And so you get the dump. And what I explain to people is, you imagine going through training like shooting or fighting or whatever. Like you go to a dojo and jiu-jitsu, whatever, and you and your buddy are rolling. And you think about your heart rate and your focus and all the adrenaline that's going on in something like that. And it's like it just turns on from zero to that in nothing. And so after in the first shooting, I went to post-critical incident counseling. And what's interesting is all they do in that stuff is explain what's going on in your head. And it makes total sense. Yeah. And they said, and the doctor was telling, he says, how's your medical knowledge? And we had just gone through like a tactical, not medic, but how to help your buddy. You're not a SWAT medic, but you know the basics of how to control bleeding and put on tourniquets and patch bullet holes and stuff like that. And he said, so what happens when your blood pressure drops really low, like you're bleeding out or your heart's slowing down? Well, you pass out. He was right. And he said, so what are you worried about, like when you're driving down the road and you have a panic attack? Well, that you're going to pass out and hit somebody. He says, how the hell are you going to pass out when your blood pressure's 200 over 160? Good point. Well done, sir. He said, yeah, your OSAT's up, your pulse is up, your pressure's up. You're not going to pass out. He said, that's the adrenaline dump. That's what's going on. And after that, when you, just like you said, and you said, you know what's going on and what's going to happen, and it goes away.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it was just something that kind of clicked in my head today, that it never happened before, that it was always just kind of, you have to just ride through this and just hope for the best. And today it was just something that kind of clicked, and it was just, this isn't the end.
I hope you realize that's a big breakthrough. I personally, Matt's saying he'd gone through. I had to go to counseling to learn that. And actually, the lady who was my counselor, she's passed on now. She's actually one of our friends, fellow musician's mom, who was a counselor who passed away. And I knew who she was. And so I went to see her, and I saw her several times, and I got that very breakthrough from her. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, I was just that way. I mean, I was letting it spin out of control. It would get worse and worse and worse because the worse it gets, the worse it gets. I mean, everybody here knows what we're talking about. Anybody who's watching who's ever had anxiety attacks, if you can't figure out a way mentally to get them into check, the heartbeat leads to breathing, leads to hyperventilating, leads to all these crazy thoughts, and you're thinking irrationally, and before you know, it's a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if you can get that little tool in there in the beginning and throw it into the gears, you'll get over it faster. So you kind of had a breakthrough all by yourself. Mm-hmm. I would urge you that if it's something that really is causing you a lot of pain and stress, man, counseling. I was real skeptical about it. Like I was like, no, I'm a tough dude. I don't need counseling and blah blah blah. Dude, it helped me so much.
It's something I've looked into actually. So
they don't do anything weird. Like I say, I was required to go in one shooting, and then another one I didn't shoot at anybody, but I was there, so it was kind of optional, and I went. And that's really all they do. Mm-hmm. They explain what's going on, and you remember it. And that's a crazy thing about the whole response. And the way one doctor said, he explained it. He said, "Here's the thing: everybody needs a little bit of adrenaline, okay? And there are things that trigger it." And he said, "So you as a cop, when you pull up to a house or you make a stop, it can go from 0 to holy shit in no time, and your brain kind of gets used to that." And he said, "What happens is you kind of strip the threads on your adrenaline valve. So you can be sitting at the house, and there'll be a loud noise, something, a dog knocks something over, or, traffic accident outside. And where you might need a little bit of adrenaline just to sort of wake you up and go, oh crap, there's something going on. Your valve just throws open into the full fight or flight, and your cognitive brain hasn't fully caught up to it yet. And you and I used to fence together. If you imagine going to a tournament where you're and picture yourself after the second break of a really tough fight, and you're pouring sweat, you're hyper focused, you're tunnel visioned, everything is going on, you're sweating like a pig, your heart rate's crazy, all the physical, all the mental, everything is poured in. It's going from sitting down reading a book to that with absolutely no reference to reality. Yeah. That is a hard thing to get used to. And it's like if you've ever been sleepwalking, if you've ever had a sleepwalking thing, and I have, when you wake up in another place and you have no context and no knowledge of what's going on, that's how it was explained to me. And I go, oh, shit, that makes total sense. So, yeah.
Well, all right, that is a story worth toasting.
Cheers, brother. Breakthroughs.
All right.
Nice. Is your whiskey getting better? No?
It's more. It's
here. Cut it.
Cut it. Yeah. Cut it back.
If the alcohol's there's no shame in cutting whiskey as long as you only cut it with water.
Okay.
Don't cut it with anything else.
How much do I put in?
Put a little bit in. Taste it. If it's still too much, put a little more in. There's no shame in it.
Okay. Yeah.
The important thing is you drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
You get it to a point where you kind of taste the fruit and the vanilla. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
Absolutely no shame in that. It's all about your palate.
It's all about calming down the alcohol so you can taste the more.
That's what it was. It was just that alcohol punch that was just too much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
got it. All right, Tim, what do you got, man?
Okay, so here's another emotional
we got a teaser.
one. Here's another emotional one, and it's about my granddad. And when you sent the message out, this was going to be stories worth toasting. Or I wish I could remember how exactly you said it. It was pretty poetic.
Really
stories worth a toast.
Toastable tales.
Toastable tales,
something like
that. Deserving of a toast. Okay, so this story. My granddad told me this story when I was a little kid. It was something that happened to him when he was a little kid. He grew up in Pittsburgh, inside the Steel Peninsula in the Duquesne Homestead area during the Great Depression in steel, right there in the middle of all the steel.
Wow.
Mills. Yeah. And they were dirt dirt poor during the Depression. They were all working class, and of course, the Great Depression is what it was. Everybody should know what the Great Depression was. If you don't, figure it out, read about it. Google's your friend, or DuckDuckGo actually is your friend. So he found a German Shepherd puppy, a purebred German Shepherd puppy, I want to say in an alley. Now, I may end up embellishing some parts of the story or telling it to you through hearing it at 9 or 10 years old, but I feel like it's a pretty accurate version of the story. And my mom and I, before my mom passed away, we talked about this story a couple times. He named the dog Fritz because it was a German Shepherd, and the dog became his best friend. To the point that, the Pittsburgh streets were rough back then in the Depression. He was constantly getting picked on. He had a disability. He had an eye put out in a playground accident when he was a little kid, and so he had a glass eye, and he couldn't see very well for some of that time, and so the other kids picked on him. Well, he was getting picked on one day near his house coming home from school, and the dog jumped the fence and bit the kids and chased the kids off. Wow. This is like a movie script for a boy and his dog. And he spent a lot of time with the dog. The dog was always by his side, and everything was fine until they got into a position where there was no food in the house. And his dad, my great-grandfather, was trying to literally figure out, where am I going to get some food? How am I going to feed these kids? And a guy who lived nearby wanted the dog. And my granddad traded his dog for a couple of sacks of potatoes so his brothers and sisters would have something to eat. And so I know that people had to make sacrifices during the Depression, and that was probably a minimal sacrifice by comparison, but a young boy giving up a dog who is his best friend so his siblings can have something to eat for a couple of sacks of potatoes is a pretty amazing thing for a child to be able to grasp onto conceptually. That speaks, and I wish you guys had known my granddad, because if you had known him while I was telling the story, you would have been, that's just like something he would do. That because he carried that kind of heart through his whole life. And the way he helped to raise me and my brother, and the way he raised my mom, and the soft-hearted kindness that he always expressed toward everyone in his whole life that affected who I am as a man today is exemplified in the story of him giving up Fritz for a bag of potatoes for his brothers and sisters. Man. So, you wanted a story worth making a toast to? I feel like that's one of them.
Amen, brother. And I almost feel guilty in the comparative opulence we live in today, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I often think of how hard those times were. And my grandmother as well, she grew up on a cotton farm in the Great Depression, dirt poor. And that's
somebody wrote a song about that.
Yeah, Jamie Johnson did.
Yeah.
In color.
I'm gonna tail end that a little bit. When I went to, it was ninth grade, Lee freshman, my teacher was, his name is Mr. Norris. We called him the round mound of sound, and he knew it. He's a cool guy. He's huge, enormous, short, round guy. And he used to, just for comic relief, jump up to grab the cord on the projector screen. You know, he's a cool guy. And he taught, I think we did, if I remember right, ninth grade started around industrial age, came up to modern time, but we covered the Great Depression. And he had an assignment that you had to interview someone from the Great Depression. And he said, everybody's got grandparents. If they're not around, he said, there's nursing homes full of old people that would love to talk to a kid. He said, you can record it, you can write it or whatever. And I interviewed my grandmother. And we had lived with my grandmother, and she had lived with us throughout my lifetime. So here I am, 14 years old, 15 years old, whatever the hell I was. with stories I had never known. And my family was agrarian. They lived on a farm. And she talked about how they did okay. They had to go without a lot of, the dry goods stuff that you would buy at the store. Mm-hmm. But they raised animals and there was trading going on and they were okay. But she said people passing through, they had a set, they sold it later, a set of patio furniture that cost a shit ton of money to some wealthy family. It was like, Parisian, like you see in the sidewalk cafes and people drinking wine with their pinkies out, and they traded it for a couple of chickens to these people that just came passing through town. Yeah. And the stories were absolutely amazing. If you want to know why grandma has 30-year-old cans of Vienna sausages, that story explained everything.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's cool. That brought back a lot of memories. And they didn't have to trade pets or anything like that because they were farmers. That's where the food came from. So cool story. I love it. That is a cool story.
Well, thanks. It's funny how that came flooding back to me when you sent out that message, and I thought, well, what kind of story do I have that's some kind of a meaningful story worth toasting? And then, instantly this picture of this German Shepherd pops up.
That's a good one, man. Yeah. People don't understand the Great Depression and what that was like. And I know we freak out over everything we see on the internet every 6 months, the coronavirus and all, but the Great Depression, man, that made some folks, that produced a lot of hard people.
It did. And you think about what happened to that generation. That generation went through the Great Depression to come of age and serve in the Second World War.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. When those people, when that generation finally got that war won and came home and things started to settle down, they had a certain attitude about life. My grandmother had a certain attitude about people and life and about wasting things. My grandmother wouldn't. I mean, if she had to waste something, especially food, that was a cardinal sin to her. Because she remembered, having to go days without food, wondering, boy, I sure hope we get something to eat before somebody starves to death.
Yeah, they regretted the wasteful times of the roaring
20s. Yeah.
Here comes a memory back. I have my grandmother's cast iron.
I do too.
Yeah, it kind of got. My mom lived by herself before she passed and didn't do a lot of cast iron cooking, didn't want to mess with it. And I inherited it and reconditioned it and learned all about seasoning and then retired and got really into cooking, and I could make an amazing steak in it. And I had a memory the other day when I was cleaning it out. I would watch her in the evenings scrape that skillet for 20 minutes for like a tablespoon of gravy, and she would put it in a Tupperware thing with that.
No waste. Yeah. Exactly.
And that would be on a piece of toast in the morning for breakfast.
Even the bacon fat and all of the lard and all of that stuff, it would get put in metal coffee cans, and you wouldn't dare throw any of that stuff away.
I have her grease canister, bacon grease I still use.
Yeah, during the Depression, you could eat lard to sustain yourself. That's what it came down to. And so they had a very different mentality about we don't know what hunger is. And none of us know what hunger really, really is. Homeless people, can get something to eat in this country most of the time.
Our poorest people are obese.
Our poorest people are obese. They have a microwave, a television, and a video game system in their house, and they're considered poverty-stricken. We don't know what poverty-stricken is in this day and age, and I don't want anyone to have to go through that, Americans or anyone in the world. But we've lost some perspective, and there is some value. I don't want to say there's value in suffering. That's a dickhead thing to say.
There's value in the learning we've gained from it because you and I mean, I'm 49. You're
50.
90 something. 50. Yeah. Okay. And so we have Mike in the room, who's about my son's age, and you and I have seen people who've lived through that. Like, I can tell the story about my grandmother and the stuff that she saved. I mean, if you've ever cleaned out the house of somebody from that age after they've died, holy hell, they have tons of stuff. Just food and all that. They just hoard and hoard and hoard because they don't know when the bottom's going to drop out again, because they've seen it happen. We've never seen that happen.
Yeah. My grandmother had hundreds of packages of Sweet and Low, and straws. Anytime she got a straw in a bag of fast food or got a milkshake, or I mean, she would not throw anything that was remotely of value away because of that mentality, because of that upbringing, you know. And so it's kind of funny. I would be kind of, you know, a smart ass kid when I was growing up, telling my grandma, "You're a pack rat. You need to get rid of some of this stuff. Well, I didn't understand at the time. As an adult, going through her house after she and my grandfather had passed away, getting ready to sell that place, and going through all of that stuff, I understood as an adult things, you know, where I wish I could have, you know, I could go back now and say, "Hey, Grandma, I understand a little bit better now. I will never completely understand, but now I kind of get it, and I'm sorry I was kind of a jerk sometimes about the fact that you were a pack rat."
So it's something we regret as we get older when we were that way.
I don't have Great Depression stories, but I do have grandparent stories if you guys want any.
Later on, dude.
Absolutely.
So
I just came up with another story to tell, so I'll feel better if you guys tell another one.
My mom's dad was... I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about this guy. And I never met him. He died a couple years before my brother was born, so I never had the chance to meet him. But a couple of stories that she would tell me is that whenever she was younger, my aunt had a date that, you know, one night, and the guy came over, parked outside, and just started honking his horn. And so she got up and went to the door, and he's like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, he's here. I'm going to go outside." He's like, "No, sit back down." And so she sits down, and he keeps honking, and then he finally, you know, gets tired of honking, comes up into the door, and he's like, "You don't ever do that. If you're going to come pick up a girl for a date, you need to go up to the door and, you know, introduce yourself and, you know, pick her up properly." And it was just that kind of that mentality that he had. And, you know, after he died, if I can kind of go over to my dad's dad, my dad's dad told my mom, that she didn't have to worry because he was her dad now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
So... And my favorite story about my dad's dad, his name was Speedy. My mom's dad was named Otto. And my favorite story about Speedy was he owned a body shop out in Sanderson, which I know you guys have probably been there.
Oh, yeah.
And it was Speedy's body shop. They did paint, they did repairs, the tires, everything, all the trucks and the cars in the back, and just this little shop. And every time, his favorite time was when they would repave the roads, because he would take his broom and sweep all the rocks onto the street so that people would, you know, it would crack windshields and they'd have to go to his shop in order to.
Oh, hell.
And that's a story that I've been told so many times, and everyone that kind of tells it swears that it's the truth. And it's my favorite story of his, but you know,
that is a good story.
Yeah.
Legends and lore.
But like I said, both of them, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about either of those two guys, and but.
Well, I've got a funny one that Tim kicked it off. I got two stories, both are related to World War II. Actually, it starts off with Breaking Bad, because I'm a fan and I can't go 20 minutes without talking about it. I took my wife to a concert in Albuquerque a couple of years ago, and we spent time. We did the self-guided Breaking Bad tour, which takes you to the U.S., Atomic Energy Museum, or whatever the hell it is, which is featured in the movie and is a fascinating place to go. I had no idea how badass this museum was. Mm-hmm. Blew my mind. One of the exhibits is the atomic age of the 50s, when that was the coolest thing in the world, were all of the little home things that popped up here and there. Children's games that had radium in them with a little toy Geiger counter and all this stuff. Well, one of the things they had was called a Revigador.
What?
Revigador.
That sounds like something that could get you in trouble at work for saying it out loud.
Revigator. Revigator. The Revigator was a crock for dispensing water. It's about that wide.
Oh, yeah.
That tall with a lid and a valve on it. that was lined with a clay. It's a regular porcelain, like expensive crockery was, like Tom Arnold and his bean pots.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of stuff. But it's lined with a uranium ore slurry clay thing that radiates the shit out of the water for your ultimate health. It's you got to look it up. Anyway, quackery, and my wife and I walked through there, and we talked about how we can see that based on all the bullshit we have today, and this existed before the internet, so it's before cleansing diets and all this other bullshit and essential oils and all the other shit that people sell you. But we both remarked that in the era of the Revigidor, it was very likely that either side of our family was wealthy enough to afford this kind of bullshit, right? It's like, we can afford that, man.
We cannot afford 4-syllable appliances.
Dude, we grew up with, God damn it, we ate table legs for 27 years. That's all we had, and we were thankful for it. Yeah. It was amazing. Well, my wife's grandmother passed away at a very ripe old age, and the attic of her old farmhouse in Miles, Texas was a closely guarded secret. Nobody got to go in there. And guess what they found in it? I'm going to take a photo right now. And in this is a photo of a Revigidor. Bam, right behind Tim there. There it is, folks. And that will
That's the actual one?
That is the one. That is a no-shit Revigidor with an uranium lining. Everything still works on it. Yeah. No, it's uranium ore, so it's not a processed product. It's actually radiating your balls. I'm probably giving off more radiation to you guys in the room than.
This podcast is over.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever come over to my house, we have some pottery that was passed down to my wife from her family, and it's called Fiesta. And certain colors of these very popular pitchers are radioactive because they have.
I've got a joke. This is great soup, Tim.
Yeah. Made in Pripyat. Wait.
Beautiful. That's a work of art.
Well, anyway, that's kind of a neat deal. I'm glad you got that, and here's to radioactive housewares.
Yes, sir.
Here's to you, Revigidors.
Here's to you, Revigidor people. Radium for your health, or uranium. All right. So I'll tell you the reason I kind of came up with that topic and pitched it. And I thought about refining it and just left it alone because you guys always come up with interesting stuff. This is what every Wednesday night of my life when I go to Murray's is like. I'm going to share a World War II story that is legendary among glider pilots and World War II historians that you may not know about, that I've known about since I've been a glider pilot. This is going back to 1984, 85. And I learned something new about it 3 days ago, laying on my couch, feeling like shit after a cancer treatment, that I have to share with the world because it is still, to this day, not well known because it's not politically correct.
Okay.
So let me start back with the story that I'm going to butcher. I'm going to screw this up. Look up the Shangri-La Rescue. It's the history guy does one of the best things. So you nodded your head. You know a little bit about it. So I'm going to give a thumbnail as quick as I can. There were, in World War II, in the Pacific Theater, in the island of New Guinea, it was accidentally discovered that there was a very high altitude valley with a population of indigenous people. And it was very beautiful, and it became a pathway to what they called morale flights. Morale means, recreation. Like in my day, it's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, MWR Center. So what could happen on your days off? You're in the military, you're stationed somewhere in the Pacific Theater, you pay a few bucks, you get to get on a DC-3, and they fly you around, and people with bones in their noses and spears shake them at you as you fly overhead and you fly home. Problem was, one of these flights, a DC-3, crashed into the side of a mountain. The story is that the pilot took an unauthorized route because he had a hot date that night and slammed into the side of a mountain. The tragedy of all this, which I am not glossing over, just I'm getting to the cool part, but a lot of people died. 3 people survived. 2 Army officers, 2 males, I think they were both officers, and a nurse. By the way, the nurse was hot. I'm going to get that out of the way.
Nice.
3 people survived, right? Nice.
Nice.
This is nice. They survive, and they find themselves among this completely indigenous culture. And so they've disappeared. The flight never comes back. The Army Air Corps goes, holy shit, what are we going to do? So they start a search. Well, they found out he took the unauthorized route, and they locate it, and they fly over and wag the wings. I think one source says another C-47, DC-3, flew over. It was like, what the hell do we do? I don't know. So they just shoved a couple of life rafts out so they could get under them for sun protection or whatever. These people are injured. The nurse had to take the shoes off of her dead best friend. Mm-hmm. One of the men lost a twin brother. This is a horrible. Please, I'm not making light of the situation. What I'm going to make light of at the end is sort of a cultural norm, political correctness thing. Just, you guys bear with me. This is good. So they're found. They drop in. I'm going to screw this all up. They drop in some paratroopers. First of all, they want to make sure that they're not, being seasoned by cannibal culture or anything. They actually got along pretty well with the locals. Mm-hmm. They thought this was pretty cool. There was a candy, and I've had some because of the Civil Air Patrol. It was sold it was issued as a carbohydrate supplement. It was a hard candy that looks like a pill about that big, and it is awesome. It's the best hard candy you'll ever put in your mouth, made with cane sugar, and all the old flavorings back then. It was the shit. Well, they had a bunch of that, and they gave it to the natives, and they're like, all right, we're cool. So they all got along. They dropped in some paratroopers to make sure everything was cool, and one of the things they dropped in was a war correspondent or a newsreel or somebody, so it's all over the place.
Movie Town News.
Yeah. So back in the very good, Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So back in those days,
my voice cracked.
Just like today, everybody felt really sorry for this girl who's probably the only female in this whole bunch. She got like 1,600 bras in one shipment. Like, people are throwing shit, and the guys are like, these are very difficult to eat. Could you send, some cookies or some shit? Like we've been wearing the same underwear.
Yeah.
They were there for about a month.
That's funny.
The problem was, how the hell do we get these people out? Mm-hmm. Helicopters of the era couldn't get them out. They were like at 5,000 or 6,000 feet in this valley.
Giant bra slingshot.
Right. We strung together 1,600 bras and shot them to safety over. And they couldn't figure it out. There was nowhere to land. And one of the things this crew did was clear a path to land something. Well, there was only one aircraft that could do it at the time, at that altitude and that span. And that was a CG-4 Waco, the glider, the combat glider. All right. You guys look it up. CG-4, the combat glider. And they could land in a very short span. And gliders take off in a very short span, but they have to be towed. So you pop up off the ground long before the tow plane. Mm-hmm. I've come off the ground the same time a Pawnee 260 has lifted its tail. So it's very short. And if you look up Skyhook and some other operations, there was a method devised to fly a DC-3 over the glider and hook it up and jerk it in the air. It never really works. Very similar to Skyhook. It uses then the brand new space age nylon. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we can't do anything else. There were no roads, no way to get a vehicle in there. I mean, they have to build roads. Let's get these people out. We had at their disposal, the DC-3 was enough to do it. They had bigger planes, but they had a couple of the gliders hanging around. So they dropped the gliders in. They dropped the troops in. They built a runway. They cleared a runway. All they needed was stumps. That was the other thing about the glider. They're so light. They can hit things that a B-25 might sustain damage from. They're pretty resilient. And they did the math on it, and they figured out they could take a few people out at a time. So they had to use more than one. I forgot all the numbers on this. I'm screwing it up, but they could take one or two out at a time. This was not something that was routinely trained. As I understand it, some sources have said every time they tried to jerk a glider, it failed.
Yeah, it's like I always picture that scene from Fandango when they're going to try to get the train to pull their broken down car.
Yes, just like that.
And so just yanks the whole front of the car off, and they're just sitting there like, what the hell just happened?
I will tell you, it's a foreboding thing every time when you're getting ready to tow in a sailplane, and you're sitting there and they level the wings out. Somebody holds the wing up for you, and the tow plane takes the slack out. because it bumps you forward a few feet.
Yeah.
And you're going, I'm like a feather back here.
Uh-huh.
Right? And they throw the coals to it and the power just from one single propeller. Also referred to as a fan. That's very important later.
Yes.
We call them fans. But anyway, so imagine being loaded up in one of these gliders with nothing in front of you, waiting for that DC-3 to come in and
skyhook
grab
your
you
ass.
and slingshot you like a booger off a fingernail into the sky, right? They did it, and the shit worked. They got everybody out and all the gear. I think they wrecked a glider.
Was the tow cable elastic in some way, or
Skyhook uses... Okay, Skyhook is the one the CIA came up with, and it has a bungee element in there. Skyhook's for one person. Like, they would put a CIA spook in somewhere, and he would do all of his spy stuff and then go out in the middle of nowhere, run up a balloon,
and
sit in a harness, and they would grab him.
Yeah.
I only looked at 2 or 3 more sources. I never really questioned it, but I think it had a lot to do with nylon in the slingshot. Mm-hmm. So there was something in there that did provide some kind of shock, obviously, because I don't know. I can't imagine what the speed would have to be on that.
I would like to know the initial acceleration.
Yeah.
You're like zero. Let's say we're trying to slow our DC-3 down to make this hookup. What's the bottom end on a DC-3?
It doesn't matter because you can't be near your stall speed.
No, you can't, because you will be below your stall speed.
At 5,000 feet. So, folks, if you're not a pilot, understand, at 5,000 feet, there's very, very little air to go under your under your wings.
Yeah, exactly.
So helicopters at the time couldn't even fly that high. Mm-hmm. So you have to do a lot of math to get that right.
I bet they were flaps up 120 knots.
Oh, they were probably firewalled.
They were screaming, man. They didn't want to take a chance on stalling.
I don't know anything about the system. It was just successful. They got everyone out. It was all said and done.
That's awesome. You given me something to read about, by the way.
Yeah, it is cool. I want to read over the system. I understand Skyhook. I do not understand how they jerk those gliders off the ground. I have a clue.
I want those numbers bad now.
None of this has anything to do with the story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, directly. I've heard that story again. It's very famous among glider pilots. The CG4 and the history of combat gliders is amazing. I mean, that's just... And by the way, folks, here in West Texas, go to Lubbock, Texas. There's a glider museum. My wife and I are going to go here fairly soon. It has nothing to do with that. That's over. I've heard that story so many times, I can recite it. I was laying on the couch the other day watching a video, and I saw a photograph I have never seen before of the 3 survivors in front of a glider. Guess what that glider's name was? YouTube. I'm going to apologize in advance. This is historical. The Fanless Faggot.
Oh, it's a British cigarette.
It's a pile of sticks with no propeller.
Oh, a pile of sticks with no propeller.
Bammo. Fag's a cigarette. Faggot. Pile of sticks. Wooden airplane with no engine. The Fanless Faggot. And they're all standing here. Our grandkids can never show this picture. So I Googled the name, and it appears very seldom. So no offense to anyone, that is the most awesome airplane name ever in the lexicon of history and where we are today. So
this British cigarette just told a cool story.
That's right. Yeah. So that breathed new life into a story that has been, like I said, in glider pilot lore for many years. And I went, wait, what? What'd that say?
It's so funny how language and lexicon have changed over the years, and how the nature of symbols and language change so fluidly in such a short period of time. There are a lot of things controversially with regard to language and symbols, obviously. I mean, dude, language is under attack right now. Free speech is under attack in a way. In the West, it has never been under attack before. But symbols are as well. And if you look at, I can pull a lot of stuff out of my hat here, but the Confederate battle flag, for instance, it stood for one thing in the beginning during the war, but over the 150 years, the symbol stood for something else. It came to symbolize Southern pride.
Yeah.
And then and for a long time, everyone just accepted, yeah, man, they lost the war, but they're really proud of being from the South, and this is a remnant from it. And it was totally acceptable to fly rebel flags everywhere. You went to Lee.
I did.
And you hung out with black dudes in the 80s who flew the rebel flag on their cars.
I was in photojournalism, and I took pictures for the newspaper. And it is an absolute shame that disorganized, grab-astical pieces of shit like me were in charge of so much history, because I've lost so many things. One of the things I lost was a photograph at a pep rally of the largest Confederate flag I've ever seen in my life that two kids bought and strung up on two poles that they assembled, and they would hold it up at pep rallies and football games. So this thing is like, I couldn't even tell you, 20 feet across, and they held it up by two poles. And I have a photo somewhere of a white kid and a black kid holding that flag. Yeah. And at Lee High School, there was, we had white, Hispanic, and black kids, significant population of all of them. And that was kind of in the hip hop era, and it was cool. And they wore the clocks around the necks of the black kids. And
yeah, boy,
that's when they started having kind of their own certain look of cars, right? There was sort of a hip hop look to the cars and what they wore. And I can remember these dudes cruising by in this car, and it didn't look like a lowrider. It wasn't like the redneck jacked up in the back thing. It just had its own look. And there were like 4 or 5 black kids and rebel flags all over the back of this car. And
Lee High School, yeah. Robert E. Lee High.
And you look
pride.
back at it, and there was a moment in time where we took something that stood for one thing and we made it school pride, because you could run down to the hardware store and buy one.
But you could not have made that school pride if it was not an accepted symbol for Southern pride. And then, my greater point being that all of a sudden, in the span of a very short period of time, we went from the General Lee and the Robert E. Lee High School rebels in the almost the blink of an eye to let's tear down all these statues and let's burn all these flags.
Well, you mentioned that. I went to work after high school, and I go to Midland College, and I got a job at a software store in the mall. Worked with a girl.
Software, etc.
It was off of B. Dalton Bookseller. It was an offshoot.
Yeah.
And so she was like the class behind me, somewhere in there. And she's black, and they were part of a student group that was taking the rebel flag out of school. And I said, how did that happen? And she was telling me, it's a symbol of hatred and slavery. And I go, okay, well, I get it. Whatever. I didn't see it that way. And she says, well, you've got a lot to learn. I'm like, chick, your brother was one of my best friends in high school. Like, the only reason I don't hang out with him now is because the dickhead went to like Baylor or something like that. He's not here in Midland with the rest of us, But after that, that's when all that kind of, and it's sort of, you don't see it on cars, you don't see it on windows, they don't paint it on the streets anymore on the way to the football games. But it's something that changed.
Yeah. So it's linguists. I watched a documentary one time on linguists and the nature of how quickly symbols and language can change, and lexicon overall in general can change. And an interesting quote I remember from that documentary was, a linguist is not interested in words like deoxyribonucleic acid, okay, or something like that, or supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, whatever. He's interested in words like duh.
Yeah,
because
good point.
Those roots and the impulse behind the root words and simple words are where a lot of that stuff. It's the root and the derivation of a lot
makes
of
sense.
those.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's kind of a funny thing how in just the span of a generation or two, fag means one thing and fagot means another thing. And anyway.
Kind of going back onto that same thing, I went to Lee too, but just later on from whenever you went to it. But I know even going into my tenure at Lee, is that right?
No.
Tenure is if you're a teacher.
Matt, cut that part out. It's 64 minutes.
That's all right.
my time as a student at Lee.
Your time as an alum.
Thank you.
Good. I like that.
At Lee, even then, I know that was really at the dying end of the Confederate flag.
Was it?
Yeah, it was still kind of seen here and there.
What year did you graduate high school?
05.
What?
Yeah.
You would see it
My
here
son
and
was
there.
06.
He's a child.
But it was always if someone saw it, it was no, you can't have that. That needs to get out of here now.
Mm-hmm.
But at that same time, you have just your school songs and everything. Our unofficial school song was Dixie, and
Yeah.
our song was Cotton.
The
The songs we
Booster
played were
Club-
Cotton Flats.
The Booster Club sold like mugs and shit with the rebel flag printed on it.
And they only dropped Dixie like 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
and
Yeah.
that's what. Yeah, I was gonna say they just got rid of it, and now they're using just their generic school song
Right.
that
Yeah.
And,
every school has the same theme to.
And here's the irony of that. I'll let you guys on a little drop a little knowledge on you guys. You may know this, but Dixie, Abraham Lincoln's favorite song.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I do remember that.
It is widely reported that was his favorite song, and he requested it anytime a band was playing. He may have even written about it.
We've changed stuff so many times. And what made me think about it, a little later, I was catching some exercise and I was thinking about the word faggot. And it appears in, every other word that Lenny Bruce said.
Oh, yeah.
It's in Alice's Restaurant.
Yeah.
So even among the most liberal, unbathed hippie culture of the counterculture era, that was still a bad thing. You want to hear how that word has turned around? Watch Louis C.K. or Joe Rogan's sketches about how that comes around, and I'll let you guys look it up on your own. But it means something totally different now.
Yeah. Well, we're too concerned these days. I don't want to get too political because I know we've had enough politics on the podcast lately. But we are now, as a society, focused on speech control to such a degree that we don't really care about we don't care about the intention behind the word. We care about the word itself. So I could walk in and say, "Hey, what's up, fags?"
You did that.
And
You did that at a gig one
Yeah.
time. I don't know if you even remember that.
I guess, and that means I love you guys.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We always do that.
I don't know if you remember that. I came out of the bathroom. I don't know where the hell we were. All I know is I'm still zipping up my pants, and I knew I was pushing it toward on the break. Like our break had been long, and we were on the road. I have no idea where we were. And so the first thing I hear is a burp over the PA system, and I hear, "Get up here, fags."
Yeah. And so
They must have had really good beer there.
my point in all of that is just that we're so, as I said, we're so focused on controlling language that we're obsessed with the words themselves and not the meanings behind the words. What's hey, how many times have I sent out a group message? Hey, jerks.
Yeah.
Let's go ride motorcycles or whatever. You guys aren't jerks. I love you guys. It's the meaning and the intent and the emotional content behind the word that matters. It's not the word that matters.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you got it, Mike.
I used to go in because I used to do that same thing. Just be like, what are you jerks up to? What are you just doing whatever? But I would always put in parentheses jerks, like the familiar jerks, instead of the the negative. So it's not the bad jerks, it's the good jerks in parentheses.
Yeah.
So.
South Park did a whole episode on fags being dudes who ride Harleys.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is brilliant. If you guys have not seen that episode, if you see no other episode of South Park, see that
Yeah,
one.
like I said, in Joe Rogan and Louis C.K.'s interpretation on the words. But what got me about this whole thing, again, I'm half asleep, and there's a picture of him next to the nose art, and like one head, and I'll put it up. We're at 68 minutes. Okay. I'll put up the picture here, and it's covering up part of it, and you're going, okay, that definitely, that says faggot. Is it fanless, fearless? What? And so I looked it up, and everybody's just like mums the word. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not totally. They do change. The word gay itself changed.
The word gay. We'll have a gay old time. Hey, Wilma. Yeah.
All of that changed. The word straight has changed.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those
my
things.
my brother, who is a master diesel mechanic, used to use a lubricant called Dr. Tranny. it is now no longer called Dr. Tranny, and I will dig up the picture that I took, and if Matt wants to put it up, he can put it up right here. It's a picture of the old labeling of the lubricant, Dr. Tranny, and what they changed the name to that was more politically correct, because the nature of the word tranny, it used to mean your transmission. Oh man, I went to the drag strip and I blew up my tranny. Well, dude, if you say that these days, it has a completely different meaning
different thing
than even a decade ago. And so it's a funny thing, man. Language and linguistics and symbology is a deeper field of study than most people actually realize. Yeah.
And it's funny, even when you watch TV and movies in enlightened eras, it's still harsher than now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still stuff that would be cringy in our day and age.
Yeah.
I think anyway, but it's all amazing, and I saw that and I thought, holy hell! This is one of those things I got to tell these dudes about it. So that's where it came from. So one of the most iconic airplanes in the history of military aviation, certainly in the history of combat gliders, is named the Fanless Faggot. so there you go. I got nothing else, gents. This is beautiful whiskey. Mike, how did it go your first round with whiskey?
At first it was pretty rough, and then after we put the water into it, it was like, oh, okay, this is drinkable.
Right,
water's your friend on whiskey. Yeah, for sure.
I saved just enough for one toast out. Guys, thank you for coming. And we'll do this again.
Absolutely.
Glad to be back to trash.
Yes.
We got more stuff coming. The Van Cave, vancave.com, YouTube, Facebook. Just put us in the search engine. You'll be there. Thank you for watching. Like us. Give us a subscribe. We're all attention whores. We need all we can get. Thank you, folks. Enjoy.
Yeah.
It's better the longer it sits.
Mm-hmm.